Hi, my name is Aubrey Dean, and I chose to do my author apprenticeship over Clive Barker. Clive Barker was born in England in 1952. He started his writing career in the 1980s, and he is now a film director, novelist, playwright, visual artist, and illustrator. If you look to the right, that is actually one of his self-portraits. And now you can see him in his studio on the right, and him and his good friend Stephen King on the left. He also has many comic books, video games, as well as short story anthologies. He released a horror anthology called The Books of Blood from 1984 through 1985, and this anthology established him as a horror author and also is what we have to credit for a lot of the popular horror films and characters that we know today. In the fifth volume of the Books of Blood, he released a short story called The Forbidden, which was the basis for the character of Candyman, which you might know from the now very popular Candyman film franchise. In the first volume of the Books of Blood, he released a story called The Midnight Meat Train, which has since been adapted into the film starring Bradley Cooper. In the sixth volume of the Books of Blood, he released a story called The Last Illusion, which was developed into the 1995 film Lord of Illusions. While the Books of Blood were very popular, Clive Barker's most notable work is probably his novella The Hellbound Heart, which was published in the horror anthology Night Vision, specifically the third volume, which was edited by George R. R. Martin. This novella was the basis for the film Hellraiser, which features the iconic characters of Pinhead and the Cenobites, and spawned another incredibly popular film franchise, and this was actually Clive Barker's directorial debut as well. Another novella by Barker, Cabal, was also developed into a feature film that he directed called Nightbreed, which starred horror director David Cronenberg, which you can see here pictured with Clive Barker. I consider myself to be a pretty big fan of Clive Barker, so I wanted to read something by him that I hadn't read before, so I chose to read his 1992 novel, The Thief of Always, which was written with the intent to be a fantasy horror novel for all ages. So The Thief of Always follows 10-year-old boy Harvey Swick, who, quote, was being eaten alive by the great gray beast February. Harvey Swick was just super bored with his life and was in need of some adventure and excitement, and some magic demons happened to overhear that and decided to bring Harvey back to what is called the Holiday House. So the magic demon that finds Harvey takes him to Mr. Hood's Holiday House, which is just a house that promises kids pretty much anything they could possibly want. There's an unlimited amount of incredible food. They have no responsibilities. They're able to play all day and do whatever they'd like. The seasons change throughout the day, so you would get every holiday in one day, starting in the morning with spring and ending every night with Christmas. Here, Harvey meets Wendell, which you can see pictured here with him. These are all original illustrations from Clive Barker to go along with the book. And Wendell quickly becomes Harvey's best friend. Wendell has been at the Holiday House longer than Harvey, but he has no interest in trying to figure out how it works. He always says, "Who cares?" because he just wants to have a good time. Harvey also meets the character of Lulu, who has been there longer than both Harvey and Wendell, and it shows because she's almost completely lost her mind. She is a little loopy, but still very nice to Harvey. So things go on like this for a while with Harvey, Lulu, and Wendell playing, and Harvey seems to think everything is okay. He's having a good time, so he doesn't question why he's there or if he can leave. But eventually he starts to notice that something is not quite right with the house, and he does try to escape with Wendell, and they learn that it is almost impossible for them to escape, and that when they do try to escape Mr. Hood's Holiday House, that Mr. Hood's magic demons try to prevent him from doing so. These demons include Rictus, Jive, and Karna, and they are demons Mr. Hood has created to protect the Holiday House and also to lure children into the Holiday House. But after escaping Karna very briefly, they are able to make their way back through the big misty force field that guards the house into the real world, but only to discover that every day they spent in the holiday house equated to 1 year in the real world, and Harvey had spent 31 years now in living in the holiday house. His parents didn't recognize him when he tried to go back home, and of course this made him very angry, so he decided he was going to go back in to the holiday house and defeat Mr. Hood once and amazingly enough, Harvey, being only a 10-year-old mortal boy, is able to defeat all 3 of the demons, as well as Mr. Hood himself, which he outsmarts and gets him to use his own magic against him by trying to get him to create Harvey a gift that is so extravagant that it'll use up all of his magic, which is to have all of the seasons going at once. So this creates this massive storm, and it destroys the house completely, and Mr. Hood with it. And everything ends all good and well. Harvey goes back home and everything is back to normal. A literary technique that Clive Barker uses in this book that I really enjoyed and wanted to incorporate in my own writing is his use of repetition in describing things. He does this an incredible amount of times in this book. I'll give you some examples. So in describing the Hood house, he says, "It was a place built for games, chases, and adventures. It was a maze in which no 2 doors were alike. It was a treasure house where some notorious pirate had hidden his blood-stained booty. It was a resting place for carpets flown by jinns and boxes sealed before the flood, where eggs of beasts that the earth were lost were wrapped and waiting for the sun's heat to catch them." He uses this almost monologuing technique of describing things many different ways in one paragraph. For a lot of different things throughout the book, and I really think it brings a sense of childlike wonder into the book, which is nice considering it's a children's horror fantasy. But this is something I would want to incorporate into my writing as well, because I think it's really fun to find that many ways to describe something, and I think it gives you a really good image as well. His use of metaphor and simile also ties into the perspective of the child that you get from Harvey, because he chooses things that are things children would think of. For example, in referring to Mr. Hood, he says, "Blood was life, and life was what Hood fed upon. He was a vampire, sure enough." While Mr. Hood's character is not a vampire, it makes sense for Harvey, a child who is obsessed with monsters and things of the like, to compare him to a vampire, knowing that he's trying to steal years away from people's lives. Probably my favorite thing about Clive Barker's writing is definitely his style and the way he is able to blend together this incredible mix of horror and fantasy elements. The way he writes magic is really cool. I think it works really well for this novel in particular. I'm interested in writing horror for children, and I think one of my favorite things about that is a lot of the creativity that goes into it. And he certainly has it. He comes up with these incredible monsters and these situations that just are absolutely otherworldly and incredibly interesting, and I would love to be at least a little bit like him one day. So in conclusion, I really gained a lot of perspective in reading this work by Clive Barker. I think it has inspired me to take a little bit of that creativity and especially that repetition technique into my own writing. And I hope you all, if you haven't read anything by him, that you definitely check him out or at least watch some of his films, because he's really a visionary, an absolute visionary. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your finals week and luck in all your future endeavors. Bye-bye.